Having some career cravings? Need more spice and fulfillment in your career? Welcome to Career Cravings Talk Show with your host, Dev Ramcharan. Dev and his guests will guide you to achieve those career goals and dreams. Satisfy those cravings. Now, without further ado, meet your host, Dev.
Well, good evening, everyone. This is Dev Ramcharan coming from Toronto, beautiful, beautiful Toronto at a beautiful time of year. And I am going to have one of the most unusual shows I have ever had. Because the person that I'm going to interview today is not a star. He's not a celebrity. The individual is not somebody who is one of the captains of industry. The individual is not, indeed, anybody particularly special or important. I'm interviewing myself. And you might ask yourself the question, well, how's that going to go? You're going to sit there and interview yourself? What are you doing? Looking into a mirror or something? I really don't know how I'm going to pull this off, but I'm going to do something that allows me to teach you a particular technique. And the technique is to be able to determine your next steps by actually having a deeply reflective conversation with yourself about your career. You'll often find that in reality, the best possible guide, the best possible captain for your career is not someone that you pay outside or someone outside of yourself. It's you. You as the individual know more than anyone else what you're good at, what you've done, where you've been, and where you might want to go. So we're going to take this as a new and unusual, an innovative, or a completely ridiculous departure from the way we've been running these shows up till this point in time. Okay? So we're going to take it moving forward in the next few seconds. And I'm going to interview myself just like I would interview one of you. And we're going to get started right now. Okay, Dev, we're really glad to have you in the show. And we've known you for quite a while now. And we want to be able to get some sense from you about the career you've had to date, where you've been, what you've done, what you have discovered about working for a living in the 54 years you've actually been around on the planet. And I'm very interested in hearing what you say. I know your voice is very similar to mine, so people may have a hard time distinguishing you from me. So I'm going to talk to you, and since you are me, well, both you and I are confused, as well as the audience, but we'll see what we can do to make this work. What do you think? Yep, let's try it. I've got no problem with that. Let's try it out and see how it works. It may suck or it may work, but if it works, great. If it sucks, well, at least we learned something, right? Yep, I agree with you. We will have learned something. Okay, tell me about your career. Well, it's been a very, very interesting career. For some people, it might not amount to something that's particularly dramatic or hugely thrilling, but it's been a career that's had a lot of twists and turns, a lot of mistakes, a lot of successes, and some failures along the way too. And I'm happy to say at this particular point in time, it continues to turn in directions that I just really had not anticipated. Well, where did the career actually start? When you think about where you have been, you said it's been a very, very twisty, turny kind of career from where you started to where you are now. Where did it all begin? Well, I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba. My father was on a kind of scholarship from Trinidad to go to university in Manitoba, and he went from Trinidad, which I guess is it's a very, very hot little island in the Caribbean, to Winnipeg, where the temperatures dropped to about minus 50 in winter. And I don't think they knew what that actually meant until they actually got there. And while they were there, and my mom and my dad, and he was in university getting his degree in animal husbandry, in agriculture in the university. He and his wife had 2 kids, so we were Canadian by birth. But when I was about 6 years of age, they went back home to Trinidad. So I had an early exposure to Canadian culture, and really the only thing I remember about those days, the early childhood days, was the snow and playing in the snow and running around with my friends in the snow, and a little bit about a kind of nursery school that I was at, where you drew pictures and you did art and so on. And I found I really loved that. Just little snapshots of memories. not much from Winnipeg, but a lot more from Trinidad, where I got there as a child and went to boys' schools and eventually when I was 17, came back to Toronto and stayed there from 17 all the way to now, and I'm now 54 years of age. And the career that I wanted to be in when I was a little kid had to do with the helping profession. I wanted to be a doctor, but gosh, back then little boys wanted to be astronauts or doctors or dentists or something like that. But I had no clue how I would become a doctor, and I certainly didn't have the math brain and the left brain requirements to be able to become a doctor. Anyway, I did the last year of high school in Toronto. At the time, it was something called Grade 13, which was almost like a virtual year one university. And I decided, and I really wanted to, do something completely different to what my relatives had done. They had done sensible things like engineering and accounting and law. Some had gone into other fields. Instead, I went into fine art, and it was quite a ridiculous departure from anything that any member of the family had done. And I did first year university, or at least almost completed first year university. Dropped out when I got to the end of that first year. And I used to say it was because the first girlfriend I ever had broke my heart, and I fell out of school with a broken heart, and that's only partially true. The rest of the story is I just didn't apply myself. I was bored. I really didn't find myself connecting well with the profs, and the courses that I took, apart from the raw art courses, included extremely interesting things such as Marxist-Leninism 101 and Cultures of the Oppressed in the Americas, both calculated to build a revolutionary, but not much of a person to actually find a place in a profession anywhere. So eventually I dropped out of school just before first year exams, not knowing what the heck I would do. And I went to work for a small art store. And in that art store, I started off as the janitor. I was actually the janitor, Here I am, a young man dropping out of school and going straight into cleaning a store from top to bottom. And then from there, I worked for a while in the store itself, serving customers. And I found I really loved that. I loved that direct interaction with customers and just helping them to match what they were looking for with the things that we had on sale: paints, brushes, eventually the different kinds of illustration boards, cardboard, foam core, all that kind of stuff. Well, eventually what I would do is I would move to the accounts payable section of the company, and I was terrible at it. I hated it, and I hated numbers, and I was no good at it. And then my wife and I had married a beautiful young woman who I'm still with after all these years. And we went to Trinidad thinking that somehow we would go make a life for ourselves there. And we didn't. After about 9 months, we made the journey back home to Toronto. And I took the first job that came my way, which was working with my hands in a sprinkler fitting company, the kind of company where they go into buildings and put in fire sprinkler systems. So if anything catches fire, a sprinkler system turns on and douses and removes all the flames. And I worked in the shop, cutting and grooving pipes. That was my job. And it was a really, really rough, tough, difficult job. And I had to learn to cut and groove these pipes with machine oil flying up in my face, embedded in my skin. It was impossible to get out for many, many, many months. Very, very hard, very heavy manual labor. But I was very grateful to the man who had hired me because he took a chance on me, and I did it. And I was good at the little job that I had to do in that particular company. And what did it teach me? Well, most of the people that I worked with were Italian background, very new immigrants, didn't speak much English at all. And I learned to work with a very diverse group of people and to still communicate well, to learn to work well with that group and to earn, you didn't just get it, earn their respect as someone who was able to work as hard as they did and to do the work that you had to do, no matter how hard it might be. And I tell you, there were times when we had to take these 22-foot lengths of steel pipe off trucks in the middle of wintertime with snow and ice using your bare hands, because if you wore your gloves, you could actually tear your arm right out of the socket because of the weight of the pipe flying off the truck as you pulled it off. So we learned to do those things barehanded, and then we learned to manage the cuts and bruises on our hands and our arms, and just continue getting the job done. So it's one of the hardest jobs I ever had to do, but I learned a great deal about working with other people that I wouldn't normally have worked with. So that's at least the beginning of my career. Okay. I got it. So that's the beginning of your career. And you grew up in Trinidad. What did your parents do for a living? Well, that's a good question. My dad worked for the Ministry of Agriculture. He was an officer in the Ministry of Agriculture, and what his job was, it was focused around animal husbandry, beef, cattle production across the island of Trinidad. And he was responsible for a region, and his job was to go out and work with all the farmers so that they would be able to have farms that aligned with a particular standard of expectations, and were compliant with government regulations for government-assisted farms. And that was his job. He was an expert in a very highly specialized field that was embarrassing to talk about with my buddies at school if they asked me. He specialized in the area of artificial insemination for cattle, so that they would be able to get pregnant and have young. And try and explain that to a 14-year-old friend at school. It never went well. So that's what my father did for a living. He was an expert on beef and cattle production in the island, and did the job for many, many years before he moved and came to live in Toronto, where I was living with my sister. The two of us were living in Toronto at the time, back in the late 1980s. My mother worked at the university, the local university, and she supervised a pool of secretaries in what you would call today the finance section, but which is called the bursary. So my mom and dad basically were typical middle-class Trinidadians. We grew up very comfortable. We didn't lack for anything at all, but I still yearned and pined for Canada and to come back to the country of my birth, and to get away from the farm life that I'd grown up in a little country district in a town, a little village called Dabadie, which was in Trinidad, and came here and just kind of made a life for myself. So my mom and dad had set a precedent of hard work, of their own progression through their careers, and of really dedicating themselves to varied ways of making a living. My dad and my mom had great jobs, but on top of that, they had a farm, a chicken farm that did extremely well. And I'll tell you a story about my father in connection with the farm. The farm was making a considerable amount of money. It was making a lot of money. But my dad found that it was starting to affect the behavior of his children, that they were starting to behave like people who didn't understand or relate well to other people around them. And my dad became worried that the money that he was making in the farm was starting to have a negative impact on his kids, and so he decided to downsize the farm. Now, I don't know if I would have made that kind of a decision. I do not know if I would downsize operations and make less money because my kids were being negatively affected and their attitudes were starting to be shaped by the prosperity of the family. I think I would have done something else rather than that. So I say that because it demonstrates an example that was set by my father for me with respect to the importance of work and the importance of money that I think has had an impact on us for the rest of our lives, where money has not been the center of the universe. It's not been the center of the world. It's not been the be-all and end-all. We will not kill or fight people for money. Money is a means to an end, And that's all it is. It's nothing that makes you a better or a worse person than anyone else. It can, in fact, tend to make you a worse person the more that you have. But we learned from my father in particular to be very watchful and mindful of the impact and the effect of prosperity on us. So that's kind of the example that was set. So here I am. I've got parents who came up from poverty themselves, but built an extremely comfortable life for themselves and for their children. And now here's a son of theirs who goes and into a line of university that no one else in the family would see as practical or logical or reasonable, and doesn't even see it through to completion. He checks out and he drops out, and then he goes to work in a store doing sort of like low level work, and then goes back to work again after coming back to Trinidad and going back to Toronto in pretty much blue collar work with your hands kind of work. So it must have been quite a thing for my parents to observe all of the twists and turns of this kid that they had raised, who was complicated, sometimes difficult, stubborn, had his own mind, but often didn't know what direction to take, and flew by chance from opportunity to opportunity. So does that give you a little bit of background? Well, yeah, it does. But I'm going to actually ask a question early that we usually ask our guests, and I want you to really stop and think about this for you. Here you are, you're 54 years of age. If you had the chance to talk to that kid who just basically knocked around and didn't know what he wanted to do and had no clue what he was good at, and in fact felt that he was good at nothing, what would you say to him today? Oh man, I've asked everybody that question, but it's kind of hard when I ask myself that question. This is what I would say to him. I'd say, listen, I want you to shut your mouth and listen to what I'm telling you. You listen to me. This is what you need to know. You are going to build a career for yourself. You're going to have scary days, and you're going to have many, many days where you don't even know what you're doing. But you will figure it out. And what you will learn is there isn't anything you can't figure out. Given enough time, enough hard work, and enough people you can ask questions of around you. You're going to develop a real gift for building relationships with people that you don't know. You're going to have a gift for friendship, and also a gift for sizing people up and almost instantaneously working out who they are, what moves them, what stands in their way, where they're headed, and what their potential is. You're going to be the kind of person who, when he works with people and when he manages people, actually has a deep affection and loyalty to them. They will be like extended family members to you. So that when they let you down, and they will, you're going to feel that pain twice as hard as someone who doesn't have that kind of relationship with the people around him. But you'll make it through that. You're going to get into a career where all your self-doubts are going to be on the surface of your skin, and you're going to push past those self-doubts, and you're going to do things that no one thought you would ever be able to do. At first, you'll be pushing to achieve things almost as if you're trying to prove to people, I'll show you, I'll do this, I'll do that, in spite of what you think about me and what I can do. But that'll just be the early stage of your later career. You'll push past that in the late years, and you'll realize it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. What's your potential? And when you see your gift for leadership, your gift for developing people, and your gift for getting to the heart of complex problems and coming up with ways and solutions to at least start resolving them, that's when you will find who you really are as a professional. And that's when your career is going to enter its scariest and its richest stage, because you are going to be playing in areas you have no qualification for. You are going to be stepping into areas and issues nothing in your background has prepared you for, except for the fact that you will have realized the following things. You learned a lot of stuff with nobody ever being your teacher. Sit down and think about what you've learned. 1. Did anybody ever teach you to become a speaker? And you'll know the answer to that question is no. You learn to be a speaker by speaking. Did anybody ever teach you to be an artist? Well, you had a little help along the way from a gifted teacher way back when you were a kid. But beyond that, no. You were all self-taught. How did you learn? By doing it. Did anybody ever teach you the direction you needed to take in building a series of certifications and qualifications as a consultant who can richly affect the development of staff in organizations? No, you figured that out yourself. You figured it all out for yourself. Did you ever go to school to learn to become a leader or a manager in an organization? And the answer to that question is no. You learned it through observation and through doing it. You learned through doing. And so what that teaches you is there is nothing you cannot learn by doing what you need to do. So that's what I would tell myself as a young person, sitting there with no anchor, unsure what to do, a terrible sense of insecurity, and a sense that I really don't know what I can do, or if there ever is going to be something that I would love doing and that I could do. All right, I get that. So that's a good conversation you just had with yourself. But what I want you to tell me about now is this. You talked about the early stage of your career, but eventually you moved past the early stage into something that became the primary domain that you've worked in ever since then. Tell us about that, will you? All right, okay. But first I want to explain something to you. This name Dev, because that's not my name. And you know that too, don't you? The name Dev is a short form that really comes from the inability of people who speak the English language to pronounce my actual name. My actual name is Devanand, Devanand. But nobody calls me that because they made a hash of it every time they tried to pronounce it. And so the short form of that is Dave, D-E-V. And the thing is, after a while, people called me Dev all the time, to the point that I stopped correcting them, and in fact began to introduce myself as Dev, so I became Dev. And so in a way, the very name that people know me as is a kind of mask for the person that I really am underneath the name. So the name itself is not my name, but it's what people know me as. It's a funny thing, because in your life, in people's lives, I notice in their careers, people know each other by what they choose to show of themselves in the workplace and in their careers and in the work that they actually do. But they may never know the full richness, the full variety, the multitude, the world that is that person under the skin, under the title or the job or the name or the limited exposure they have to that person. So my name itself is a short form for something richer and longer and considerably more comprehensive than Dev. But Dev it is, and Dev it will continue to be as I go through the rest of my days. So that's my name aside now. Okay? Let's talk about the career. I fell into project management. Somebody heard me speaking at church, and they thought that I came across with a degree of firmness and at the same time ability to articulate that they felt would make me a good project manager. Now, I don't know how that person had a clue, because I didn't even know what project management was. And as it turned out, as I got to know him, neither did he. So this was something that kind of happened, quote unquote, by chance. To me, it was the hand of God actually working in my life as an individual. And I am a person of deep personal biblical faith. So I firmly believe that. But at the same time, I plopped into project management by chance, as it were, and continued in it. Did project coordination and barely had a clue what I was doing in one of Canada's biggest telephone companies. It was the first sort of version of something called Rogers Wireless that was called back in the early 80s Rogers Cantel, Cantel. And I started off as a project coordinator, and then after a while realized I wasn't enjoying it because people saw it almost like a secretarial role. Not that there was anything wrong with that. It's just that that's not what I wanted to do. And so when an opportunity came up to take on a job as an equipment and data engineer, something I wasn't qualified to do, and I got the job and didn't do it particularly well, but managed to survive through it and learned a little bit more about the telephone business. Then after went back into project management, this time as a full-fledged project manager, then moved into a manager of project management, and then continued to progress over a decade and a half in different telephone companies and always leading project management offices. And the part of it that I excelled at really was the development of individuals, people, the people side, the interpersonal side of project management and of people development. That's what I loved. Others excelled at making the numbers, but they were not very good at developing people. Well, my forte was in seeing talent in individuals and triggering that talent, putting them into positions that push them so that they would have no choice but to express the talent that I saw was in them, and to develop them to the point where they could then move into more and more senior roles. And I'm proud to say that over the years, a number of people that have worked for me have become directors, senior directors, and executive officers in organizations. And I'm very, very pleased about that. Actually, it's something that I feel quite proud of that has happened through the years. If I were to think on the things that I'm proudest of, that would be one of them. Well, okay, so that's one of the things that you're proudest of. So what if I ask you this question that I usually ask at the end of the interview, but I'll ask you now. You're at your retirement party, and people are there, and they're saying things about Dev Ramcharan or Devanand Ramcharan. And what do you want to hear them say? Do you want them to say he was an amazing innovator, he changed the industry he was in, he made huge amounts of money, he was the absolute expert in a particular field? What do you want to hear them say, Dev? I want to hear them say that working with him made me see my own greatness. Working with him made me realize potential I couldn't have imagined I had. There were times I wanted to just knock him down onto the ground because of how hard he pushed me, and he never stopped giving me work to do, but that work brought the best out of me. It made me the profoundly gifted professional that I am because he saw my gifts, and I didn't see my gifts. He believed in me when I didn't see things in myself to believe in, and he made me who I am today, or helped me to become who I am, by helping me to discover the skills I needed to continue a process of growth and development that was triggered by him, and it's never stopped all the way through. I guess that's one of the things that I want to hear people say about me. I don't know what they're going to say. I haven't got a clue, and chances are I'll never be able to retire. Financially, I may have to bop until I drop. I don't know if I'll ever be able to retire. But if I ever had a retirement party, then that's what I would want to hear people actually say. All right. So we've got that. We've heard your early career. We've heard your middle career a little bit. We've gotten a sense of what your childhood involved. But tell me a little bit more about the middle to late stage of your career. Okay. I want to go back to my childhood for a minute and talk a little bit about one other aspect. When I was a child, I went to a private school, a couple of private schools that my parents could barely afford for us to be able to attend, but they did, and they did because, well, they were encouraged to do that because of the better educational standards by an uncle of mine who I loved and who gave them good advice. It was good advice, and who really helped our family in many ways in the early stage when my mom and dad were just starting off, had 2 kids, and didn't have much in the way of money or savings or anything at all. He really was very, very kind to us. And I remember him very fondly, my Uncle Jai and my Aunt Grace, who is his wife, who I love because she was wonderful. She still is alive and is still, of all of my aunts, my favorite. She was the one that we really, really, really loved because of how kind she was to us. In many ways, because of the way, taking us back and forth to school and so on and so forth. In our childhood, she almost was like a second mom to our mom, who looked after us too. So that was the advice they gave. Now, why would I bring that up? I was rubbing shoulders with kids at school who were from very, very accomplished families. So I went to school with the son of the Archbishop of Trinidad, the Archbishop of the Anglican Church, with the son of Colonel Henry Christopher, who was sort of the senior officer in the little army that Trinidad had, which was big for Trinidad, though very small by North American standards. It was just like a drop in the ocean. But still, he was the chief of staff of the army, I believe. And then there were the sons of many very, very successful, renowned businessmen in the island. So I was surrounded by people who were driven, who were the children of accomplished individuals, and many of themselves were very, very, very incredibly gifted and hardworking students. So without realizing it, their example was somewhere in my gut, somewhere in my heart. Something else that was always an operating background reality, and that is that in my family there are a number of writers, one of whom won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2001. So V.S. Naipaul, who's quite a renowned novelist and an individual who wrote nonfiction journalistic studies of colonial countries who were in post-colonial days and the malaise that these countries went through. That's my father's first cousin. So if you ever felt as if you were daunted by relatives and friends and colleagues around you, well, that's who I had to measure up against as individuals who had accomplishments. And so in a way, it kind of drove me to be who I am, to take my own direction. I knew I could never measure up to most of those people, including most of my cousins. So I kind of had to find my own way. So finding my own way and listening to my own inner voice then, and moving through in project management, I moved on eventually from being a manager of a project management office to having my first experience of the termination that haunted me for years after, where I was laid off because there wasn't enough project work. And it was a time where they just didn't need a manager of project management. And this happened in 2010 and continued to be sort of a thing in the back of my mind that I must always guard against and ensure I'm always providing enough value for that never to be something that I would experience again. So the experience of legendary individuals in my family whose accomplishments are way beyond the pale of everyday accomplishments, highly skilled and gifted colleagues and people that I rubbed shoulders with in school, as well as my own relatives, cousins, very, very gifted and very, very well accomplished cousins, and people in the office, people in the workplace who had the same kind of effect on me as those individuals that I've just described to you, because I have always been surrounded by individuals who have been extremely talented, very intelligent, highly articulate, and at the same time extremely well educated. But in spite of all that, I moved on, found work again, climbed my way up from project manager to director of a project management office. And my first directorship was with a small software development company. It was only a short stint, but eventually I moved on to a contract where I was a senior director with directors and senior managers and all their staff reporting to me in a cancer control agency, the Cancer Care Ontario, where I did my work for a year and really loved it, really enjoyed it, and then moved on to a directorship at the Federal Canadian Partnership Against Cancer, which I loved for about 2.5 years, and then found, because it had become very operational, very steady state, very routine, that I felt like I was being suffocated. It had nothing to do with the organization. It's a wonderful organization, but what I found is I need something to build from scratch, to rebuild and reframe, or to fix that is broken. That's what I need. But when it is well and truly fixed and working well, I need to move on because day to day routine operations is just not something I enjoy doing. In fact, I find it really hard to just do something on a routine basis without having some significant change and improvement that I can make. That's what I love to do. It allows me to use my creativity to the max, people skills, leadership skills, etc., in order to reframe and rebuild the processes or build them from scratch so that an organization can be stood up that maximizes its value to the organization I'm building it in and that triggers the greatness in the individuals working with me. So I'm going to stop for a minute so you can ask me a couple more questions because my voice is getting tired here. Okay, let me give you a break then, and let me tell you what I've observed in some of what you're saying, and that is you kind of fishtailed your way through your career and somehow managed to hit all the right spots that related to the talents that you have, though sometimes those were primarily required for the jobs you did, and at other times it was more of something on the side, a tangent or an aspect of what you did, as opposed to core to being successful. Would you say that's right? Yeah, I'd say that's about right. Yeah, that's true. That's actually true. But what I found is now, after having done about a year and a half of consulting independently and enjoying it, but at the same time going through the classic experience of consulting on your own, there were days of hunger, and we really learned to enjoy the taste of beans and rice because that's all we ate for quite a while. And at the same time, times of incredible accomplishment where there were just massive things that were positively done at the same time as I found myself making very, very good money during those periods. So there were times of feast and there were times of famine. But eventually, an old friend who I'd worked with as my boss years before, and in fact, I'd worked with her twice in two different companies, called me up and said, we're looking for somebody to take on a senior manager's role in our IT infrastructure division, managing and building it at a bank, at the corporate offices of one of Canada's banks. And I thought to myself, what, a bank? I couldn't even imagine working in a bank. Like, why would I want to do that? So I thought, all right, I owe this woman a lot. Let me go in for the interview and see what happens. So I went in for the interview, and there were 4 associate vice presidents and the vice president, and they asked me a bunch of powerful questions. And I loved it. I thought, I am totally comfortable with this process and with this group of people because I've always, in the last decade of my career, been very comfortable working with executives directly. And they talked me through the role, and I answered all their questions and was able to give them some life experience about what it is like and what are the struggles of managing a project management office and the degree to which you can make the mistake of overbuilding processes, overbuilding the structure and the intricacies of what the machine looks like, so that over time, your project management office is all about the care and feeding of itself and its own processes, as opposed to delivering business value to the company you find yourself in. And that resonated with them. And I told them the truth, and I told them where I had screwed up things. And you know what? They made me an offer directly after that interview, that one single interview. And so I sat down and I had to really think about this. Do I want to go back and work full time? Or do I want to continue to try and build my consultancy? And I made the decision to go back to work because it had all the elements that I love. A complex organization with the need to rebuild a project management office from scratch, to populate it with the best professionals I could find, betting on their potential without knowing for sure that they would be able to do the things that I would envision on my own. Complex interpersonal relationships to build and build and build across an organization that has in it about 86,000 employees. 86,000 employees. The division I'm in alone has over 3,500 employees. And I've got to build linkages across the division I'm in, together with linkages to the centralized corporate enterprise project management office. And that appealed to me tremendously. It wasn't the money, because the money couldn't at all compare to what I was making as a consultant. It was the opportunity, and I've taken it on, and I've been working there since. And I tell you, I've been there for almost 4 months. There is not a day that I do not wake up thinking I'm really looking forward to going to my job. And though I've had some challenging days, in 4 months, with all of this complexity and all of this difficulty and all of this challenge, there is not one day I can describe as having been a rotten day. I have loved doing this work. And I'm going to continue to do the work, and I'm going to build them the best project management office they have ever seen. And I'm going to take the staff that are working with me, and I'm going to trigger their greatness so that though they are going to hate me for it some days, they are going to see things they can do that they never imagined they could do. That's what I intend to do in this job. And I intend to do it very, very soon and continue building them as we go through the process together. It's not going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be really hard. All right, I get that. And that's interesting to hear. So, an interesting career so far. But something that kind of escapes me, Dev, as I listen to you talk is, what are you going to do in the future? Like, where do you see your career headed? Where do you see the direction going as far as where you want to be in the long term, say the next 10 years? What do you think you want to be doing then? That's the question I was hoping you weren't going to ask me, because it's the toughest question in the world for me. Oh, it's easy for me as a coach and a consultant and somebody who helps other people with their careers to ask them that question and then to sit back and observe as they answer. But for myself, it's a hard question. I can't lie to you and say I know exactly where I'm going to be in 10 years. I don't know what it's going to be. It could be an executive role moving into the AVP arena, which is full-fledged executive in the banks as far as our bank is concerned. That's a potential step forward for me. And it intrigues me because it's operation at a level that is strategic, which is what I love, as opposed to just in the day-to-day operational state. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is to, over a few years, rebuild a consultancy that's refocused in a particular direction. And that too intrigues me. But for some reason in my gut, where I'm pulled to more is the direction of an executive role and being able to fire on all cylinders at a strategic level, building and shaping an organization or my part of the organization so that it helps the overall business, it helps the overall organization to be better and stronger than it has ever been. So that's where I see myself headed, potentially 2 directions, a fork in the road. And you know what? My whole career has been about forks in the road. And I've always chosen directions and managed to move in directions that people did not anticipate I would go in. And I've always worked past the limitations that other people have put on me and my own limitations I put on myself, jumping into situations where I really didn't have the qualifications and managed to learn on the job through doing, believing I could do it, and just putting in the time necessary to be able to get up to speed and eventually, in some instances, to excel and to really do the best possible work that I could do. So that's where I am today, and that's where I see myself headed over the next little while. Well, Dev, thank you for sharing what you've just shared. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move to our second segment, and we're going to reflect on these things that you've just told us. But thank you for sharing what you did, because I think there's at least one person in all the people out there that listen to this broadcast and that listen to the podcast who might get at least one thing out of what you've said to inspire them to just keep on pushing forward, even though some days they feel they don't know what they're doing and they don't know where they're going. Okay, so that was Dev Ramcharan interviewing Dev Ramcharan. What can we now learn having reflected a little bit on that career and all of its different changes, its ups and downs, its twists and its turns? And how can we take something out of all of that complexity, and apply it to our own careers? Well, if there's a theme that runs through that career, it is variety. There's been a lot of variety in what he's done for a living, what I've done for a living, that involve twists and turns in directions that were unanticipated, sometimes through contacts, sometimes through force of circumstance, sometimes through opportunities that presented themselves. But in every circumstance, Dev was willing to jump beyond his boundaries and comfort zone to do something that he wouldn't have anticipated doing prior to the offer landing in his lap. And he did it, and he's been moving forward to continue to do these things. There has been a mountain of self-doubt, a lot of worry and anxiety, a lot of feeling of ineptitude and incapacity and sometimes incompetence inside of himself that he has had to overcome and continue to do what he has had to do to be able to do the jobs that he's been doing. One thing that he's learned to do is to believe in his own internal guiding principles, to realize that no one else out there is going to be able to give him good advice on where to go in his career, because they never have been. In fact, the people that have advised him had always advised against the things to do that he had chosen to do and which he excelled at. When he was starting to become a speaker, people talked to him about how stupid speaking was and how little it did to help people's lives. Now, he speaks for his church all around the world, internationally, and he does it because he loves helping people and because he loves connecting them with stories that they can relate to and which will strengthen them to push through the troubles, the trials, the challenges, and the obstacles in their lives to actually achieve something great, something profound, something that changes the people and the world around them. So he does that, and he did that in spite of negative criticism and people advising him not to do it. Same thing with the jobs that he's done. There have been people that have said to him, you don't have any qualifications for that work. Why would you take that on? And he pushed past that feedback and did the jobs anyway, because it didn't matter what anybody else thought. It didn't matter ultimately what anybody else said. He was going to go and experiment and find out whether or not he could do something of value in every one of those jobs. So that's another thing. It's a really interesting paradox. On the one hand, there is fearfulness and anxiety, but on the other hand, there is the courage to embrace change and to do something completely different in an unfamiliar environment and to push hard to be able to achieve in it. So how do you explain those combinations of paradoxes? How do you explain that combination of anxiety and fearfulness and courage and determination on the other side? Well, if you reflect on yourself and you look at your own life, you're the same way. That is what it is to be human. We push past fear. We push past the voice that says inside of our heads, you can't do that. You don't even know where to begin to do that. And look at the problem you're in now. The fact that you're in this problem demonstrates you don't know what you're doing. And pushing past those voices inside, the voices at the table in our head, which is like our board of directors, where you've got the negative carping people on the left side of the table to push past their advice to do what the other people around that table say, which is, you know what? You've done things you haven't done before, and you managed to find a way. Or your gifts and your abilities are such that you will leverage them to find your way in this job and excel in it. And you are going to be successful in this job. And what I've learned to do, what Dev learned to do, is to listen to those other voices and to move forward. Thankfully, along the way, he's had people that have been good friends who have seen things in him which he never believed he had in him. And when they said what he had in himself, he doubted and he dismissed what they said, but eventually found they were absolutely right. They were absolutely right. And so, if you were to ask him, as we did, where are you going in your career? He would say, I really don't know, but I'm still going forward, and I'm enjoying it every step of the way. And I will find my way to whatever my greatness is as far as my career is concerned in order to build and to strengthen others and the organizations that I work with. What Dev didn't tell you is that he is on 3 boards of directors. In one, he's a co-chair. He's the co-chair of the Family Association for Mental Health Everywhere, co-chair of that board, a wonderful little public sector agency which looks after families of those who have members that are deeply affected by mental illness of all types, all varieties. Dev has also just been asked to join a community advisory board for another agency that helps people that are homeless and that are living on the streets and need to find a place to actually live. And Dev is on the board of his church, once again leading and helping and strengthening others who are with him. Dev is also struggling with hay fever because this is the time of year for that. So in this particular conversation, where I have had a conversation with myself, some of it may have worked, some of it may have not have worked for you. What I've tried to do is to treat myself as somebody outside of myself and to do something in the way of analysis of my career in order to share stories with you which may or may not have been useful to you. But I hope that you will have found some kind of value in these stories and in this strange approach that we've taken this evening, and that moving forward you will learn the best conversations you will ever have about your career, about your potential, about the change that you can make in this world. The best conversations you will ever have like that are with yourself, with a pen, with a piece of paper, sharing your thoughts, making deep observations about yourself, your career, your accomplishments, your struggles, those things you're trying to work through and resolve right now, wherever you find yourself. Those are the deepest. Those are the richest. Those are the most impactful conversations that you will ever have about your career. So I advise you to do what I do, what Dev does. Get a little pad or a little journal and use it for deep reflection. What did you learn out of a situation? What kinds of struggles are you having? What sorts of directions do you see your career turning in? And what are opportunities you can take advantage of so that you push it where it needs to go, and so that you have the impact and the value that you can add to the companies that you serve, the organizations you work in, or the business that you own, that only you can have, because you are who you are, and no one else can do what you do the way you do it. I'm Dev Ramtran, signing off from Toronto, and this is Career Cravings. Hope you can join us next time.
Well, that's our show. Thank you for joining us here at Career Cravings. Tune in to our show in 2 weeks, same place and time. We wish you the career you deserve. Until next time.